Ruth chapter 3 this morning, if you want to find your way there. Appreciate you being here with us on this Memorial Day weekend. I know there's a lot going on and people travel and all sorts of things on these long weekends, and I appreciate you being here with us. And we're going to continue with what we've been doing in Ruth this week and next week is the plan, and finish up this book. And today we're in Ruth chapter 3, and as we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, we know that God's unseen hand is at work in our lives. And the book of Ruth, reveals that. That's one of the themes, really, of the book. And we won't understand, as we've said last week, all that happens, but we trust in the providential hand of God in our lives. And the book of Ruth shows us that what looks like coincidences at sometimes, as we saw last week, may be providence. It may be God's hand at work. But Ruth also shows us that there is a place for acting. And I don't mean acting as in the Screen Actors Guild. I mean like action. There's a place for action. There's a place for doing something on our part. God's people are not to simply sit and wonder the truth that God is at work, and He's at work even in unseen ways in the world, is not meant to spiritually paralyze us. Rather, it should move us to faith, to action, as we wait upon the Lord. And that's what we're going to see this morning in Ruth chapter 3. A quick recap. Ruth and Naomi have found themselves in a difficult place. Ruth is Naomi's daughter-in-law. Both of their husbands have passed away. Naomi and her family moved to Moab about 10 years ago, and that is where her sons meet their wives, and then her husband passes away, her sons pass away. But the famine that sort of led to the decision for them to move to Moab, which was not a place that a typical faithful Israelite would move to because of all the history between the Moabites and the Israelites. But the famine has now been lifted in Israel, and Naomi's heard about it, that there's a harvest coming, things of that nature, and she decides it's time to move back to Israel. And she tells her daughters-in-laws that, hey, you need to go back to your families that you married out of and came over here into my family. And one of them goes back, but the one named Ruth says, you know what, I'm going with you, and I commit myself to you. I commit myself to your people. I commit myself to your God. And she gives her that great little speech there in Ruth chapter 1. And last week we saw that they're back in Bethlehem. That was Elimelech, that's Naomi's husband. That was Naomi, that was their hometown, right? 10 years later, they're back in their hometown, and Ruth is a foreigner in this town, and she's looking for a place to get food for them because they're widows. And Ruth is a foreigner, and they're somewhat destitute. And so she's looking for a place that she can participate in the harvest, and so she goes to glean in the fields, and that is what widows and foreigners and the poor did. It was a provision made in the law for them to be able to come through, and the edges of the harvest, the corners weren't picked, and so they could pick from there. If something was dropped, they could pick it up. It was a way for provision for them. So that's what she's doing. She's gleaning in this field, and she just so happens, as we saw last week, to end up in the field of this man named Boaz, who shows great kindness to Ruth in his fields. He wishes her well, and he wishes to her that she would find ultimately the provision that she's looking for from God right here in Israel. And when she gets back to Naomi, she's very excited, or Naomi is very excited, that she had ventured into this field of this man named Boaz when she finds out who it is, because she tells her that he is a redeemer. Okay, and so we'll remind you again this morning what that means. He is a redeemer. In other words, one who can rescue their family from their plight that they're in through a legal means. And so let's pick up with what happens. So now that has happened, and that Naomi realizes that Ruth has ended up meeting Boaz, that Boaz has shown kindness to them, that Boaz is a redeemer, and so he has a legal right to help them. What's going to happen next? Well, this is where it gets interesting. And Ruth chapter 3 is one of the more interesting chapters in the Bible, and in the Hebrew language, from what I understand. It is, you'll see. Here we go. Ruth chapter 3, starting in verse 1. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, Ruth's mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. And she replied, all that you say, I will do. Well, to say the least, this sounds like a very risky plan. Her motive, though, her goal, as she says here, is what? That she would find rest. And that's important as we interpret these things. What is the motive? What is the goal? What is happening here? She says, I want you to find rest. And that term in the Hebrew carries the idea of a home and a husband. I want you to find a home. It's time to find a husband, is what she's telling her. When she says, I want you to find rest. I want you to provide the provision and the protection that are available in our land through the means of having a husband. And Boaz would be out winnowing the barley that night from the harvest, him and his men. And she tells her to approach him, and she tells her when to approach him. She tells her how to approach him. She says, wash and anoint yourself, right? Now, one person I noted what is likely happening here, or possibly happening here, is it's possible, we can't know for sure, but it's possible that Ruth, up to this point, was still wearing the garments of a widow. You know, things that people would do in their culture to show that they were in a time of mourning. And it's possible that her mother-in-law, the mother of her husband, is looking at her and saying, hey, it's been a while now. You know, we've made our way back here to Bethlehem, and you've been out harvesting in the fields, and all this time, a certain amount of time has passed, and it's time to move forward. It's time that you make it known that you're open to getting married. And that's maybe what she's telling her when she says, wash and anoint yourself and put on your cloak. She could be telling her, it's time to take off your mourning clothes. And when you see she tells her what she tells her, all that she tells her to do, it does raise questions. She tells her to wait until he lies down. When he's nice and full, right? His heart is merry. He's eaten and he's drink. He lies down and he goes to bed. And then she says, go and uncover his feet and lie down next to him. Now, this carries tension in the Hebrew. Because we hear it and we're like, what do you mean lie down at his feet? That's just going to make him mad, you know. What do you mean? Well, in the Hebrew, this carries all kinds of tension and it raises all kinds of questions. What do you mean uncover his feet? What do you mean lie down beside him? What do you mean? Why am I going to this man at night, at midnight? Why am I doing these things? Is she telling her to seduce him is really the question that it raises, even in the original language. How will this be taken? How will Boaz take this? Because there are things that this can mean, and there are other things that this can mean, and there's purposeful, you might say, tension, ambiguity, so that you read this and you're kind of on the edge of your seat. And she tells her to watch where he lies down, because, as it has been pointed out, you know, you don't want to approach the wrong person in this way. And remember, Ruth is a Moabite woman. And you cannot really read this and understand the context of the Old Testament without thinking about how the Moabite race or people, how the Moabite people came into existence. Genesis 19 tells the story. Won't go into great detail, but it involves, if you're familiar with the story, it involves Lot's daughters making sure he has way too much to drink one night, and then they ultimately go in and take turns with Lot, and you end up with the Moabites and the Ammonites from this. That's how the Moabites came into existence. So when you're reading this in the Hebrew, and you're an Israelite, and you understand the Old Testament, you're reading this and you're going, oh my goodness, here's Moabite again, you know, right back where we started. That's what you might be thinking, right? That's obviously not where this text is going, but it raises the question. There's tension there. And a pastor I listened to this week actually noted, and I agree, that we need to be reminded sometimes that this is not a prescriptive thing. It's a descriptive thing. When you read the Bible, whether it's somewhere like the book of Acts or it's something in the Old Testament, not the Old Testaments, there's only one. But if you read the Old Testament or New Testament and you're reading, especially when you're reading like history, it's important that we recognize that not everything in the Bible is prescriptive. It's not always God telling you, go and do likewise. Right? Even if things turn out well. Some things are simply a description of what happened. And some things are a good example of what happened. And here, this is not saying, hey, here is the best way to find a spouse, right? Go to a place where there's a lot of members of the opposite sex, and they're all very sleepy and tired, and when they lie down to go to sleep, just go lie down next to one of them in the middle of the night. You know, do that. Make sure you smell good and that you've taken a shower, and just go lie down next to one of them. See what happens. That is not what it's saying, right? And so there are people, though, that kind of read the Bible that way, right? And they read things and they get things out of it because they think everything is a prescription of go and do likewise, and that's just not true. So what is going to happen here is, what is happening here is that Naomi has come up with a plan to encourage action on Boaz's part, and so that he would know that Ruth is open to the idea of marriage. And now it's a risky plan because a lot could go wrong. She could go into the wrong place. She could be read the wrong way, interpreted the wrong way. A lot of things could happen here in the middle of the night in the situation. They know Boaz so much. How well do they know Boaz? Well, we're going to find out. Verse 6. So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, "Who are you?" That's a normal response, right? Ruth goes about acting on Naomi's plan. She waits until the workday's over, right? It's important to remember, lots of other workers could be around, right? I doubt he was threshing the grain all by himself. And so at the end, they're kind of camped out, right? What does Boaz do? Well, he's startled. It seems likely the uncovering of his feet has exposed them to the cool of the night air, and he wakes up, and there's Ruth. But he doesn't know it's Ruth. It's dark. Who are you? Who is this, right? It's dark. It's midnight. It's a normal question. Who is this woman laying at his feet? And what's happening here? What is the plan? How will this go? Is he going to think she's seducing him? Will he think she's a stalker? All these things are on the table at this point in the text. And it says, she answered him, "I am Ruth, your servant." Now, some have pointed out that when you read in the Hebrew, that earlier in the book, when she talks about being servant, she's using one word. Here she uses a different word, and this word has ties to marriage and bearing an heir. So immediately, in other words, in the Hebrew, she's kind of already making it known. I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. And he said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman." And all, by the way, of this chapter should be read to the context of that. You are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning. So she introduces herself, right? And of course, he knows Ruth. They've met. And when they met the first time we saw last week, he told her, "Hey, I already know your story. Yeah, your reputation precedes you. You've been very faithful to your mother-in-law. You really made a name for yourself in the commitment you've shown in moving here to help take care of her." Now, remember, Naomi had told her, "You just go lie down at his feet, and then he will tell you. When he sees you there, he'll tell you what to do." But it seems here, as it's been noted, that Ruth is adjusting the plan a little bit, tweaking it, right? Rather than wait for him to tell her what to do, she urges him to act, because she knows the provisions that are available and his ability to act and provide for her and ultimately also for Naomi. And so she uses this phrase, "Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." And it's very clear. This is what she is saying to him. "Marry me, for you can help. Marry me, for you can help me and my family." She's basically proposing. She is calling to attention that he has the ability to redeem, that he can save her and Naomi and protect the land and the family name and them. So when she says, spread your wings over me, you are a redeemer, she's saying, you have the ability to do this, so marry me. It's a very bold request. I like what Daniel Block, who wrote the New American Commentary on this, said. He pointed out, whereas the question from Boaz, right, is, who are you? But Ruth's response will raise the question, who is Boaz? In other words, think about it. How will Boaz respond to this? Is he the man she believes him to be? Does he have the character of a redeemer? And he responds in a way that shows his godliness. It shows his respect for Ruth. He's not looking to take advantage of her. He's not looking to embarrass her. He simply notes her reputation, that she's a worthy woman, and that he understands and knows her character. So he doesn't read her wrong here in the middle of the night. And he notes her kindness, and this word appears multiple times. The word translated kindness appears multiple times throughout the book. In the Hebrew, it's the word hesed, or hesed. It's a loyal, loving, and kind faithfulness. It's the sort of kindness that God shows towards His people, because He's a covenant-keeping God. And it's the kind of kindness and love and compassion that God's people are to show, and to show one another. So she's not merely looking out for herself, but seeking a redeemer. And in doing so, she's looking out for Naomi and for their husband's name. So it reveals things about her character. There's only one problem. There's another relative closer in line, one who can redeem before him, who's closer in line as a relative to Elimelech. And he wants this done right. So he tells her, give him the opportunity, and I'm going to go to this man, and if he's unwilling to redeem and step up and do the right thing here, then I'll do it, right? Now you got to remember, this is the time of the judges. It's a dark time in Israel. What kind of man will this be? What if he says yes, but at the same time it's for selfish reasons and he's not a good man? She will have to wait and find out. Verse 14. So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize her. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. He didn't want people to get the wrong idea. And he said, bring the garment you are wearing and hold it out. So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did you fare, my daughter? Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. She replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. So she has to wait, right? He shows his, kind of sends a token of his commitment by sending a gift for Naomi as well. Because this whole arrangement is going to do more than benefit Ruth, because of the way this redemption works. So Naomi encourages her to wait. She's seen enough from the character of this man to say, wait, he's going to move quickly. You're not even going to have to wait till the end of the day. You're going to know something soon, but let's just wait and find out what happens. And so as we step back and we look at the story here, and where we're at in the story, we've seen you can just see God is moving. You can see it in the first couple of chapters. You see something's going on here, and Ruth being in Boaz's field, right? And in the field of one of the few people that could redeem her, and him showing her kindness, right? It's not coincidence. What I want us to see this morning from this particular text is that while God is at work in the world, we should by faith boldly act and confidently wait upon Him. That's our role. God's at work doing something. How do we respond? Well, we need to be at work. We need to be boldly acting in faith and confidently waiting upon the Lord. So let's talk about that. 2 quick applications here of our passage. The first one is we need to, by faith, boldly act. And we see that throughout this chapter of what they're doing, right? There's a lot of things that we look at this and we go, this is not prescriptive. But we can look at this and kind of go, hey, they are acting in a way that shows that they're filled with faith and expectation and trying to do things that they think honors the Lord. And that's something we can learn from, right? This is a chapter full of action. Naomi has a plan, whether you like the plan or not. I heard one pastor say this week, he said, I don't particularly like the plan, right? It's pretty risky. But she has a plan, and she acts by sharing that plan with Ruth. Ruth then acts by going in and enacting Naomi's plan and even adjusting to say, hey, you're a redeemer. Redeem me. And then Boaz, when approached, acts by promising to redeem Ruth. And we'll have to wait and see in the next chapter to see how that transpires and what happens. But he makes the promise. And the truth is, most big moments and great things in life require action, don't they? If you're married, somewhere along the way, someone proposed, right? Took the risk, popped the question, and two people at some point said I do to one another, made those vows. You didn't just hope and wonder and think. You had to act at some point. If you have a job, it probably didn't fall out of the sky, right? If you have a friend, there were conversations and trust that were built over time. Good things in life require action. They don't just happen usually. And God doesn't expect us to just sit around and wait. He wants us to act. Good things require action. And listen, a lot of God things require action. Things where God is at work, but He wants us to get involved and to act. Many times, many things here in this text could have gone wrong, right, with their actions. Naomi's plan could have backfired if Ruth went to the wrong person, was interpreted the wrong way by Boaz. If Boaz had responded differently, rejected her, embarrassed her, lots of things. But it doesn't, because they're not the only ones at work. God's at work. They're trying to get involved in what they see the Lord is doing in bringing these two people together. They are responding to the fact that God is already moving, right? Is really more of a way to looking at it. And here we see their actions, the actions being taken here, are largely by people of great character. And that's important. Ruth's character is noted by Boaz. He notes she is known around the town as a worthy woman. I heard one pastor note this week that if you were to, the way many people think the original Hebrew and Old Testament was arranged is that you would have read the book of Proverbs and the next book would have been Ruth. And the book of Proverbs, chapter 31, talks about the worthy wife, and the same phrase then is used here in the book of Ruth to talk about Ruth. And that you would, if you were reading their Old Testament, you wouldn't have missed that. You wouldn't have missed the connection here. And of course, as we know, a little spoiler for next week, Ruth is ultimately in the lineage and is one of the great-grandmothers of Solomon. So Ruth's character is on display. She's concerned for someone other than herself, right? She's looking after Naomi and the family name. As he notes, she didn't go after a young man. She came to Boaz because she was trying to show kindness to her family. She didn't just go trying to impress the wealthiest or the best-looking guy out there. She particularly has put herself before Boaz because she knows what he can do for her family. And Boaz's character is on display. He doesn't take advantage of Ruth. He doesn't interpret her wrongly. He protects her reputation. He agrees to redeem her, but only after giving the appropriate person the opportunity first. Then he sends her away with a generous gift for Naomi. So his character is on display, both in chapter 2 and in chapter 3, of what kind of man this is during the time of the Judges, when so many people weren't good men, weren't righteous men, weren't godly men, weren't pursuing the ways of Yahweh. But here is Boaz, someone who is striving to live in a way that God's law would direct him and that would honor the Lord. And the truth is, our character does shape our actions, right? We want to boldly act, and our actions are largely shaped by the kind of people we are and are becoming. It shapes if we act at all and how we act, and if we act by faith and motivated by faith and trust in the Lord, how we are perceived by others. See, it's not only important that we act and that we do something, but that we are striving to be obedient to the Lord and honor Him. And as we see what God is doing, we have the opportunity to respond to what God is doing by getting involved by faith. Notice Ruth and Boaz were showing love and kindness. It was that idea is that they were blessing others and honoring God, right? That idea of hesed. Boaz's actions were of good character and gave provision to them. And Ruth, in looking after Naomi and being unselfish. These are actions that please God. These are actions that they are behaving in a way that's with the spirit of, loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself, loving God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. Ruth's boldness is rooted as she goes before Boaz and makes this bold request, it's rooted in the idea of Boaz as a redeemer, right? So in other words, she's not just like trying to get hitched. I just need to get married, so here's a guy that knows my name, and I'm going to go get in front of him and I'm going to try to impress him. No. It's rooted in this idea of what he can do as a redeemer. We mentioned last week that in this book you see two Old Testament laws being sort of expressed together in their culture. The law provided a way for land to be redeemed and to stay in the family when a husband died. And there was also a different custom of levirate marriage that allowed for a brother to marry his dead brother's wife to provide an heir in the brother's name. And it seems at this time, and in this particular book, these ideas are sort of being expressed together, even though they're two different things in the law. It seems like kind of what's taking place. What I would say seems to be happening is that Ruth is encouraging Boaz to embrace the spirit of the laws, which were given for the purpose of protecting and providing for family. And so her actions are rooted in righteous goals that would be in line with the spirit of what those laws were for. In fact, Ruth is urging Boaz to embrace his opportunity, right, as a redeemer. Now, you might remember back in chapter 2, Boaz said this to her in Ruth 2:12. He said this to her, "The Lord repay you," when he knows her reputation and she's gleaning in his field, the Lord repay you for what you have done. And a full reward be given by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. So the first person to talk about refuge under wings is who? It's Boaz. The first time he meets her. Hey, you've taken refuge under God's wings. You've come to Israel. You've come to Bethlehem seeking the protection and the provision of Yahweh. May you find it. Now Ruth shows up in the middle of the night, says, "I'm Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." What is she really saying? She's encouraging him to marry her, to take responsibility. Here's what she's really doing. Ruth is urging him to be the answer to the prayer he gave earlier when they first met. Hey, remember how you said that I've come under the refuge of Yahweh and may I find all this? And she's like, well, I think you're Yahweh's way of answering that prayer. You need to step into that. You need to step up and be who you can be. Like you say you want that for me. Well, you're like one of the few people on the planet that can give that to me. So rather than just pray about it, why don't you do something about it in a very nice and kind way here? She's urging him here. And sometimes the answer to your prayer is your faithfulness. Sometimes the answer to the prayer happens when you begin to act. Not because you're like the answer, because the Lord wants to work through you, right? It's like praying for someone to hear the gospel. Oh, I just pray that someone would share the gospel with them, and then realizing that you talk to them every day and that you know the gospel. Oh, maybe I'm the answer to the prayer. Maybe God put somebody in their life that'll just show them the right way. Well, wait a second. I know them, and I might be the only Christian that they even know. Maybe I'm I'm praying for something, and I'm supposed to be part of the answer. The Christian life is meant to be a life of boldly acting in faith and obedience. God works providentially in our lives, but He works through our choices. He works through our actions and our decisions. And seeing the fact that God is at work and is up to something shouldn't make us passive, but rather obedient and active as we want to join Him in what He's doing by faith. So how might God want you to move in faith-filled action today? Maybe there's an invitation to someone that needs to be extended, a testimony that needs to be shared, a display of kindness that needs to be acted upon, an opportunity to minister in an area that needs to be seized, a sin that needs to be repented of and put away. Whatever, maybe, what's the action? But recognize, we don't just act by faith. Sometimes there is a time for waiting. And that's the second thing we see here. By faith, we need to confidently wait upon the Lord. Boaz here tells Ruth, there's a closer Redeemer. I'll ask him first. Just lie down and wait till morning. You can imagine what was going through Ruth's mind. Who is this guy? What is he like? What if he agrees but just wants the land and he's unkind to me and Naomi? What if he doesn't agree, but then Boaz changes his mind? Because, this guy finds some flaw in me and now it makes Boaz think that I'm not so great. She's got to simply wait. Then she gets home to Naomi, and Naomi tells her what? Wait. Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. But it's with confidence and with expectation, because she says, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. But she's told to wait. Sometimes you've walked with God, you've acted in faith, you believe, you obey, and then you wait. But we are to wait with confident faith, trusting the Lord with whatever the results are. And she has seen that God seems to be in on this. She has seen Boaz's character. She has seen his kindness, his generosity. She's taken a big risk, and it seems to have paid off. So she's got every reason to believe God is going to take care of her. That if Boaz is not the plan, that God has got another plan, because he seems to be at work in her life. But she's got to wait. And when you've done what you know you're to do, you wait. Now, not passively necessarily. You wait in prayer, wait in expectation. But sometimes you've done the act, you've stepped out in faith, but the results you're waiting on, because you don't control the results. You don't control all the results. We may obey by sharing our faith, and then someone may reject the gospel. They may even be rude to you. You may aim to show someone love and compassion and grace, and they may respond with cruelty. Not everyone lives by the golden rule, do they? Of course not. You may offer someone forgiveness. They may not be willing to change. But we act, and then we wait, and we trust the Lord with the results. And listen, sometimes the waiting, I think this is a Tom Petty song, is the hardest part. But it is. Sometimes there's a waiting, right? It may be seconds between will you marry me and a yes. It may be the days you wait for a test result. It may be the years you pray for a prodigal and you wait. It may be a lifetime of difficulty and trials as we wait upon the Lord's return. The Christian life involves a lot of waiting. But we can wait in faith because of the object of our faith is not the desired result, it's the Lord. Here's the thing. We wait upon the Lord. Our faith is in the Lord. You see, the reality is whether we are acting or waiting, ultimately it's about trusting in the Lord and His provision. Remember, Boaz told Ruth in chapter 2 she had taken refuge under God's wings. And if you're under God's wings, He's taken responsibility for you. You're His, right? We wait as we trust Him, and Ruth was learning to trust Yahweh. Boaz had become the kind of man he was through his faith in Yahweh. And throughout the text, we see Boaz as a God-centered man, a man who seems to live by faith, shaping his character, his generosity, and his actions. And throughout this chapter, we must realize that Yahweh's character is on display throughout the book of Ruth. Because He's the ultimate provider. He's the ultimate one under whom wings Ruth has fled. And so the provision that's about to be given to her is coming because she's under the wings of God. And God is shaping these people. And Hesed is on display. This faithfulness is on display because God is at work in their lives. And the truth is that we can act and we can wait in faith simply because we know the one whom has acted on our behalf to redeem us. See, Boaz points us to Christ. He's a Christ figure in the Old Testament, meant to point us to Jesus. Boaz is of great character. But see, Christ is better. Like all these, you get these pointers like David and different people in the Old Testament, but they pale infinitely in comparison to Jesus. But Boaz points us to Him. He's of great character, but right Christ is of perfect, sinless character. Boaz shows great generosity towards Ruth and Naomi, but Christ, we know, ultimately when we get to the New Testament, He gives all. Boaz was willing to redeem and rescue as he saw Ruth's great character. He calls her a worthy woman, and he's moved to action. But Jesus came and redeemed unworthy sinners because of his great love for us. See, he came and he acted, lived a sinless life, died a vicarious death in our place, rose from the dead. A man of action. And we wait now in faith for his return. And we trust him, and that should move us toward action, enable us to wait with confident expectation, because we know he's acted to save us, and we know he's going to return. And that our salvation will reach its ultimate result of eternity with him. So let me ask you this morning, first of all, do you know this Redeemer, this Christ? Have you experienced his rescue, his redemption? There's never a better time than the now if you don't. But as a believer this morning, as one who knows the Lord, the Redeemer, let me encourage you this morning to trust him and to let our faith in him and his goodness to move us to action, faith-filled action, and enable us to trustingly wait upon him when we're dealing with the unknown. Because God's at work in the world, and you and I should by faith boldly act and confidently wait upon him. Let's pray together.